is coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more particularly from beautiful Danville, Illinois. And welcome to Midday with Reverend Don. And if you follow this program, you will know that you can take part by typing your comments or questions into whatever platform you may be watching it on. And they will appear in my chat room, and I will interact with you. And I love to interact with you, and very often where this program goes is directed from the viewers and through their comments and questions. As today, I usually start out with an idea of what I'm going to say and talk about, but it certainly can go in different directions, and some days it goes in very unexpected directions. And so I hope that hope you like that aspect of the broadcast. People seem to. And I really do enjoy for it to be a conversation. Hello to Janet in the chat room. Good to see you, Janet. And I love spending this time with you. I love actually interacting with you. Today I wanted to talk about some of the new things I'm doing. I've talked about my Patreon at revdonlewis.com and how I've added a number of new features. I've added a monthly newsletter. The first one I expect to be before the end of this week. I have added a monthly seminar. The first will be on the 24th of June. And if you would like to join that seminar, you can sign up at that tier on Patreon. Or if you're not on Patreon and don't wish to join the Patreon, you can simply buy a ticket and attend that way. They're $25 at CarelianPublishing.com. And of course, at the highest tier, there is a monthly consultation. We also have a monthly mystery offering, which will be different every month. So there are a lot of different things coming at the Patreon. We're beefing the Patreon up and offering progressively more. And I'm expecting it to take a lot more of my attention as we go forward. And I love my patrons at Patreon, and I love my viewers here. Also here at paganworld.tv, my 60th birthday celebration is coming this Sunday. This will be a bit of a milestone for me, obviously. One of those big birthdays, and one I almost didn't make. So yay for being here. And I hope you will join me for that. I would love to interact with you. I will be broadcasting in the afternoon and in the evening. And we are putting out announcements for that. And you can find it on all of our platforms. But the first broadcast will be at noon, just like this one. The second at 6 p.m. Central. Both of those times are Central. So please join us for my 60th birthday bash. And I think it will be a wonderful time. And we'll be having people physically here at the house as well. During the course of the day, and we'll probably bring you some time to spend with the people who come. So I'm looking forward to that. We have the multilingual edition of the 5 Mystic Secrets at the printer. We're expecting those books to be in next week and then to go out next week. So if you've already bought one, it's not far away. If you haven't, you can find that too at CarelianPublishing.com. The 5 Mystic Secrets, if you don't know, is the first major exposition of Carelian thought written by my late mother, and now available in 8 languages to help to serve the international Carelian membership. And we also soon will be bringing out Travel Magic by Lisa McSherry, which is quite exciting. So watch for announcements about that. Other things are in the works. We have a lot going on at Carelian Publishing. And then that brings me to my own life. And one of the things, oh, and hello to Mary in the chat room. Good to see you. One of the things that I'm looking to do, and I've talked about, is doing more artwork. As you may know, before the move, I finished up the painting of Nebamun hunting birds, which is inspired by the famous Egyptian tomb painting. I won't say it's an exact reproduction. It's not, but it's inspired by it. And that was a lot of fun and a very long process. Though had it been uninterrupted, it would have been shorter, but still, it was a good long process. And I'm looking for my next major project. And I have a couple of things I'm thinking about, and I'm interested to know what you might like to see. because chances are the process will be coming to you um, on this daily broadcast and through other things. So I was thinking I might do another painting. Um, it might be, would probably be a spiritual painting of some sort. And I haven't done a lot of painting over the years. I've been mostly a black and white artist or a color marker artist. But I do painting, and so I'm looking at perhaps doing another. I'm also looking at the possibility of doing some sculpture, most likely deity figures for the altar. And I'm also debating whether to do some original sculpture or to continue painting commercially available sculptures as I've done in the past. And if you were following my sale before the move, you will have seen a lot of that sculpture. And in fact, people bought a lot of that sculpture, which was mostly commercial figures, repainted, and given a whole different lease on life by doing so. I enjoy that process. And art is a form of meditation, so it's very much a therapy for me, an art therapy, for want of a better way to put it. And so I'm looking to do more of that. So I'm curious of what people would like to see. I'm also considering the possibility of working with some jewelry, um, and perhaps some people who make jewelry. So I have a number of possibilities in front of me. And if there's anything that you would prefer to see me do, I don't guarantee that will be what I choose, but I would certainly like to know. Um, some of the ultimate answer may depend on what is most easily available to do, but I do want to know what people would like to see me do. Following a sculpture from beginning to end might be very interesting. Now, I was also working on my puppets before the move. Hello to Lilith in the chat room. Welcome, Lilith. Good to see you. And I will probably be returning to that at a certain point. But being a large project, it may take a little longer to return to. But if you were following that, you'll know that it involves sculpture as well. And we have been working on the Lenore puppet, who is basically completely resculpted from the original. And so that might be something I return to as well. If you'd like to see a focus on the puppetry, let me know. These are all different possibilities. I'm going to do one or another of them because art is an important part of how I relax and cope with life. And so I want an art project, but I'm not certain which one I necessarily want to do. And hello to the Dusty Dud. And the Dusty Duds asked if I made it to the St. Louis Pagan Picnic. They missed it, thinking it wasn't until August. And is this channel going to post videos of the event? Just curious, thanks. Actually, we were not able to get to the Pagan Picnic this year. And so obviously we'll not have video. I believe we will be there next year. We had been there every year for 20 years at least. But this year it just was not possible with the move and everything. So no, I did not make it, nor did the organization as a whole make it. But we do have our ongoing commitment to the picnic. We will be there next year. We do have film from other events that our people have been able to attend, which is coming soon. So watch for announcements of new programming, new video. It is coming in the near future. And if you happen to be a video editor or have an interest in learning video editing, feel free to contact me because we could use more people who are interested in working with video editing. And we have so many different projects in the fire. So many different things coming that I could probably occupy this program just with announcements. But of course, that would not really fulfill the purpose. The purpose of this is for us to interact, to talk about the whichness of the why, as it were. And but there will always be lots of announcements, lots of things going on. And what can we talk about today? We're about halfway through our time. Maybe I should talk about that phrase I just used, the whichness of the why. That's a Bitterwind-ism. And if you're familiar with my life, you should be familiar with Lady Bitterwind. She was my altar sister and also the first elder of the Corellian tradition for many, many years. And she was a person unlike any other. There are people she has things in common with, but she was totally unique. I learned so much from Lady Bitterwind over the years, and probably should have learned more. But isn't that always what we learn in hindsight? Lady Bitterwind was always talking about the witchness of the wise. She was very concerned. Well, and Anna says, I love her name. Let me tell you about her name. Her real name was Virginia Smith, a terribly ordinary name for a woman who is not at all ordinary. But she was born on February 2nd of 1945, apparently a very cold day in the part of the country. She was born in a cold day here in Illinois as well. Illinois is not where she was born. But she always said that she thought that Bitterwind was an appropriate name for anyone born on her birthday. And that's why she took the name. And I think she probably took it because she liked to be a bit of a spoiler of illusions. She liked to pierce illusions. And she knew that for many people, that is a bitter wind. Although I certainly never particularly found anything about her that resembled the term bitter wind. She was a lovely, cheerful person to be around. She often complained that I was a bit of a Pollyanna, but she was not negative herself. She was a very positive, outgoing, happy person. And Anna says, refreshing though, and yes, a bitter wind can be refreshing, and she was. And for the Corellian tradition, she injected a note of disruption of pattern, and this has remained certainly an important theme in my life. And others now disrupt my patterns. And looking back from the age of 60, I have had some very ingrained patterns that probably needed disruption far more than I allowed them to be disrupted. But we're still working on it. We're a work in progress. As long as we're alive, we're growing and changing. And that's a Bitterwind a thought too. One of the things Lady Bitterwind was particularly concerned about was the cycle of predation and prey. She was a nature worshiper, as most pagans would describe themselves, but she did hold the view very strongly that to say that you were a nature worshiper meant you had to look at nature honestly. One of the things I've always been taught and believed is that if you want to see the will of deity, you must look at nature, where it's most clearly displayed. And what you see is not the Lion King. It's not Bambi. It is a far more complex, beautiful, and terrible tapestry of life, where life in fact feeds on life. And we must assume, seeing this, that this is the nature of life. And in fact, if we look at life, if we look at evolution, we see that this has always been the case, and that it must be part of the divine purpose for this to be true. Even before life forms such as ourselves, there's always been intense competition between different life forms, between the single-celled organisms and the multi-celled organisms, between those who consumed carbon and those who consume oxygen. Every new growth has been accompanied by conflict and predation and prey. For Lady Bitterwind, to overlook this concept was to disavow nature. And of course, she's correct in that. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean we go out and become predators? No. It means that we must acknowledge that, for example, death is part of life, that the challenges that we must face in life are part of life, that it's not meant to be a paradise where nothing ever goes wrong or differently from what is expected, that it's always been meant to have a certain level of conflict and challenge, that this is in fact what moves life forward. That was one of Lady Bitterwind's central points of view. She had many others, and she actually, one of the things that perhaps would be a good project in coming months is to bring her writings back into publication. In her lifetime, she was known much more as an artist than as a writer, but she did write. When I was doing the Wheel of Hecate magazine, she wrote a number of columns called Dirty Tricks Incorporated, which she used to expound upon what she thought were the deceptions of the world. Hello to Kazan in the chat room. Good to see you, Kazan. One of them, well, a lot of them had to do with government. Lady Bitterwind was not pro-government. She considered herself libertarian, and she was not fond of a lot of aspects of government. She felt that government was a living thing, an egregore, if you would, and that we did ourselves a huge disservice by forgetting this. And she described government as being alive because it met the requirements for calling something alive. It could move. If you watch Borders, you'll see that all the time. It consumed, in order to live, it consumed paperwork. Well, it consumed money is what it consumed. It excreted in order to continue. What it excreted was paperwork. Brought money in, put paperwork out. Borders moved. But she had a whole thesis on this subject about why government was not only alive, but obviously alive, and that it would always act in its own interests. And of course, this is true really for everything. And we forget this at our peril. Everything that exists has an egregore at some level. Sometimes it's a very light, weak egregore. Sometimes it becomes very strong. And that egregore is not to be overlooked. And with something like a government, where so many people believe in it and stoke it with energy, it has a very strong egregore. So this was one of Lady Bitterwind's big theses. Hello to Jason in the chat room. Good to see you, nephew. In later years, Lady Bitterwind returned to artwork, and every piece of her artwork included a symbol of each of the four elements. Some people feel that they remember her artwork as also containing a symbol of masculine and feminine. And though this was often true, it was not always true. It was the elements that were always true. But her artwork was based on the idea of upcycling. And she would take old items, recombine them in new ways, usually to express a spiritual concept, which was sometimes very overt and sometimes not. In fact, if you have been following some of our social media, you may have seen that some of her major pieces were recently redistributed to Lady Alyssa, to Lord Phoenix, to Lady Kai, and to Lady Aisha. And each of these had its own very distinct meaning, as everything she did had a distinct meaning. And she had a way of looking at symbolism that was very piercing. I can remember when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old and I had done a drawing. And she was explaining all the symbolism in this drawing to me, none of which I had intentionally put into that drawing. But I had to admit it was there. And that is an interesting comment on the nature of life in the universe. And I find myself these days trying to be increasingly conscious of the fact that just because I may not have been conscious of something doesn't mean it wasn't done, that I did not do it. You know, sometimes things happen from our inner self, our higher self, our shadow self, and completely bypass our conscious self. Or they happen from the egregore we're working with. And this is a consciousness I am trying to become all the more aware of as I go forward. It's interesting, and you know, I tell people, I was talking about this just the other day, perhaps it was in my chat room, that, or perhaps it was here, that no matter how far we go spiritually, there's always more shadow work to be done. And this is because as long as we live, we're always at it. And also because the farther we go, the more we can see. And even at this point in my life, this is still true, and still a vitally important part of my existence, as of any spiritual person's existence. And so as I go forward with increased teaching, as I go into, for example, Psychic Academy, that aspect of shadow work will be no less important. Hello to Bradley in the chat room. Shadow work is very important to the priesthood, but just as important to the psychic and just as important to any person, because we all have our shadow. And if you remember, the shadow is the part of ourselves we don't see. It's the part of our spiritual selves we don't see. It involves things like belief systems we're not conscious of, expectations we're not conscious of, emotional reactions we're not conscious of, and arguably everything we're not conscious of. When we talk about past life work, very often parts of our past lives have left blockages that are still part of our shadow today. And chances are, if you find a ghost, that's actually someone else's blockage. And when you help that ghost to be freed and cross over, you're helping that person to release their blockage. And Mary in the chat room says, that is one of the things I'm looking forward to learning from you, which is shadow work. And there are so many. Thank you, Mary. And hello to Cheryl May in the chat room. It's good to see you. And it's wonderful to see everyone. And shadow work is probably something that we will talk about more in this broadcast. But also in other contexts. And when I'm talking about seminars, my first seminar is on the nature and practice of magic. And shadow work will almost undoubtedly be part of that, because you cannot effectively practice magic without addressing the issue of the shadow. But I think I'll have to have a seminar just on shadow work, because it's so important. And ML Star, hello ML Star in the chat room, asked about Lady Winterwind. We were talking about Lady Bitterwind, Virginia Smith, but she did have an alter ego called Lady Winterwind in the Team comics, and they are the same person. Well, Lady Winterwind was a caricature of Lady Bitterwind. And in fact, Lady Winterwind was shown in constantly dressed in a hooded robe and holding a lighted bomb. And that, in a way, speaks to the character of Lady Bitterwind. Hello to Keenan in the chat room. And Keenan says, I've watched your channel for years. Thank you, Keenan. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm happy to have you here today. The Team was a very interesting project, and I believe we're going to be reviving not necessarily the Team itself, but this sort of comic project, this sort of graphic novel drawn comic project. But the thing that made the Team most interesting is that there were no made-up characters. All the members of the Team were actual people who came out of our life in Chicago. And they were caricatured for the comic. And some of them really loved this, and some of them hated it. And ML Star says, I was born on January 24th, which interestingly enough is my grandmother Mabel's birthday, and was thinking for a year to call myself Winter Wind. My mom's name is Winifred. Winter Wind is a lovely name. And this would be a namesake, I suppose. One of the really interesting things about the Team is that the one time I resolved to make up a character, the person actually showed up at the next event I went to. After months of caricaturing real people, I inserted a character who was a psychic hairdresser. And she gave a whole speech about how different hairstyles affect your ability to received messages from the aliens because she was talking about how to communicate better with aliens. And how spiked hairstyles, which were very popular at that time, this was 30 years ago, helped you to draw in the alien transmissions because they were like little antennae, whereas curly hair blocked them, and straight hair caused them to kind of roll off. And there was a whole spiel, and put out by the psychic hairdresser. I don't remember the name that we gave to her now. And I thought this was a cute little piece, a great way to introduce our first totally made up character. And then there she was at the very next event I went to, the real life psychic hairdresser of Chicago. And Alan says, hello, Alan, good to see you. Alan saw me in the chat room and says, I think I know that hairstylist, and I'm almost certain that in fact you do. She was so horrified to be included in this and thought that it was meant to make fun of her, when in fact I had not known she existed. I thought I was making it up. But the vast majority of other characters in every iteration were people I actually did know. And some of them were absolutely thrilled with their caricature, even if it wasn't very flattering. They understood what a caricature was. Some of them were horrified by their caricature, even if it was flattering, because they clearly had some ego issues. Hello to Brenda in the chat room. Good to see you, Brenda. I remember one lady who I caricatured as Susie Sunshine. It was a very gentle caricature that addressed only her most positive characteristics, and she was horrified. I was always a little mystified by that. But I do realize you can tell a lot by how people react to jokes about them. If they laugh with the joke, they're a much stronger person. If they get terribly offended, they have some inner work that they might benefit by. And you really saw that with this IT. You also saw how people enjoy inserting themselves into these, because sometimes the person that I had caricatured to be a character was not the person who would step forward and insist they were the character. And we also had one particular scene where we had a large number of caricatures, unnamed, who represented the local pagan gathering. And so many people thought they were in that picture, and they were very happy and proud to be in that picture. And I had not included them, but they saw themselves in it, which was a wonderful thing. And I certainly never told anyone, at least I don't think I did, that it was not them, because of course it can be them. But it was interesting to see how many different people some of these caricatures could be. And that gave me quite a nice little bit of joy. In fact, I'd have to say the Sign Team in general was a joyful project. So as we look at new things we're doing, there probably will be more coming in terms of comics. And Alan says, rather like an ink blot test, you see things because of your internal stuff. And yeah, that's exactly how this comic affected people. And with that, I see that we've reached our half hour. I want to thank you for being here. I love spending this time with you, and it's so good to see all of you, especially those I haven't talked to for a little while. Thank you for joining me. Please join me again tomorrow, and we'll have another lovely midday conversation. And as always, this conversation can go anywhere you want to see it go. Just tell me what you'd like to talk about. Or, like today, I will go where I'm at. So thank you, and let us close with our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do in our lives, and we ask you to help us to always keep a sense of humor about ourselves and to see things realistically, both about ourselves and the world that we live in. Help us to appreciate the nature of nature, the nature of the universe, the nature of life, and not to struggle against it, but to ride the waves that carry us forward. And help us to see our own foibles with humor and with joy. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and with respect. knowing you are always with us. We bid you good day, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for joining me. I love you all. I love spending this time with you. Please join me again tomorrow. And until next time, may you bless and